then cardinal in Munich, and now he does it both. He is the front and the back, and so so we have to see how this is to be settled. So this is our contemporary issue, and it's important in that way that this papacy and all that would look very different if the Erasmus people and if the Thomas More people and so on would have come through in the 16th century, or if they would have come through in the 20th century, in the 1920s, and then up to the council. They did come through in the council, but right after the council that set in what is called the betrayal of the council. And so people who were in front of the council, like Metz and Küng and so on, and the concilium, in which I wrote many times, so several times. So all this was repressed, and Ratzinger is one of the repressing factors in the whole thing. So wherever they want to go back, I gave a speech there up in one of the colleges, and there was a Tridentine Catholic, and suddenly I found out that there are Tridentine Catholics in Kalamazoo, I think around Zirico or whatever, who don't want to recognize the Second Vatican Council, maybe not even the First Vatican Council. So while people in the center and the left would say we need a new council, Jerusalem II, they do not even accept the Vatican II and want to go back to Trent or to Lateran Council or whatever council of the past and so on. So these are very strong reactionary groups, which are also politically reactionary, and not only, so therefore the repression of the liberation theology, the cooperation of the Cardinal Managua with the CIA, who is on pay of the CIA, still is. So these are all the this thing there, what is it called, this businessman organization, the Opus Dei people, and we have the diocese too, and Cerigo is part of it, and the bishop is part of it, and so on. So that is this. And so when we ask why is the church, on the right all the time, it wouldn't be there if the Erasmians, if these humanists had won. And so people like Erich Fromm and so on, they would easily work together with the Karl Rahner, with Hans Küng, and with Metz, and so on and so on. That means humanists who would go back to the Gospels. So Erich Fromm would say Catholicism has to convert itself and go back to the Gospels and overcome its own authoritarianism, this making decisions without consultation and get from one mess into the other. And so on. But there is no public opinion in the Roman Catholic Church. Sometimes there is a little bit of it. There is a priest in Notre Dame who is asked very often who would represent a center or left-wing Catholic position, but they are less and less. So, like it was in the public sphere where the political right took over, also in the church the right took over. This is connected, also psychoanalytically. If you are a right-wing character, you will do certain things which are all interconnected in the political sphere, in the scientific sphere, and so on. If you are on the left, you will also correspondingly. And these right and left is so intense that even a woman from the left and a man from the right, they would somehow get married and they would try to live together. It wouldn't work. It would not work. Sooner or later, it would blow up. So deep these divisions go. So there are even movies about it. I can't remember anymore the name or whatever, where this was tried out, if they could not make it, if they could not be tolerant enough, and so on and so on. But when one wants to stay at home and drink beer, and the other one wants to join the peace movement, and so on, you have frictions over every issue, and it is, in the end, it would be unbearable. So, okay, so that was our contemporary issue. Do we have any comment to this? Our next point would be right and left in terms as far as Thomas is concerned, and then see if these categories are really helpful. Yes?
What possibly could the Catholic Church in America do to re-examine itself, make it more of an inclusive, democratic?
Right. Well, we have a bishop who comes here when is it, on Labor Day, whenever, for decades and decades. He's the brother of one of our professors up there, and he is retired now. But there you would see how an Erasmian bishop would look like, you know. I mean, he went to the bishops' conference always, and he would make his critical remarks and so on, and being tremendously honest, a little bit ironical, but they are bishops, you know. So there were only 3 or 4 bishops who told people that if they would vote for Obama, they would commit a mortal sin or something like that, and against the union with the Bishop of Rome and so on. So that Gesundheit, you know, so I would say that the majority has some kind of a centrist position, and there are these people on the right, but there are a few bishops also, you know, who are on the left, and there's a struggle, you know, in this whole episcopate, you know, as well.
So our church lacks any mechanism for feedback, essentially?
Well, no, I mean, they are quite aware what, you know, who is where, and but the power lies very often with the right-wing people, as long as the power lies with the right-wing people in the political sphere, you know. So it is all coordinated, where the money comes from, and so on, you know. I mean, we have it here. The money comes from Blackwater, and now Blackwater, the government has cancelled the contract with, after they were found out that they killed 18 people in the streets of Baghdad, just, you know, shot them to pieces, and so the government there did not want to have it in the country anymore, and so now a week ago, I think, the federal government cancelled the contract. That means Rico will not get his money anymore and to deliver here and in the Vatican. Yeah.
They have a new name.
Yeah.
As of today, ZXE.
Who has a new name?
Blackwater.
Really?
As in the xenon gas, odorless, and all that. Yeah, XEZ is the name of Blackwater now.
Really?
So it can apply for contracts.
Yeah. Okay.
So the old is gone, we're new.
Yeah. Well,
Listen to
Now
National
we
Public,
go to
Free Speech
Afghanistan.
TV,
Right.
type,
okay.
with Amy Goodman.
Yeah. Thank you. Good information. So that's what they usually do, just change the name. Okay, do we have anything else about our contemporary issue there? I mean, this is a decisive thing, you know. What would have happened if people like Thomas More and their thinking, it would be a completely different church. It would not be an authoritarian type of a church. And you know, there were beginnings of breaking through the 20s, that's why they canonized him. There must have been forces in the church like Rana and so on who said, you know, we forgot to canonize this fellow. That was a good sign, you know. And they, you know, these Erasmians pushed forward up to the council. And then the reaction set in. And there are different people said they are not prepared, you know, the laity was not prepared. They wanted to have their Latin Mass, you know, and so in St. Augustine down there, they flew a priest in usually once a year, and he celebrated the Roman Mass again, the Tridentine Mass, and now, in the meantime, they can do it regular services, and the Pope, you know, permitted this. That was he wanted to get the right, you know, into the church again, and so he allowed them to have that Roman Mass again. So every parish can have it again if they want to. And you know, to have the vernacular, that was what the Erasmians wanted from the very. That's why they translated the Bible. It means the Mass should be celebrated in German or in Italian or whatever, and that has happened. But now they want to have the Roman Mass again. So there are these reactionary, regressive elements, you know, and some of them are little. I mean, why shouldn't they have their Latin Mass? Let them have their Latin Mass. They don't understand a word, but the less they understand, you know, the holier it gets. So this is a very strange type of a mechanism, you know. Instead of being happy that they can understand something now, but it is not mysterious anymore. You know, if you understand it, it's not mysterious. So the less you understand, the better it is. That is a strange attitude toward the world, you know, and toward the church as well. Okay, do we have anything else?
Well, what's to prevent Father Ken Schmidt, for instance, over the last 13 years, of ever sitting in one of these sessions and saying, hey Walter, hey
Yeah.
Brad, hey Dustin,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well,
Give me some ideas. What do you think we could do
it's
to
very
bring-
good that we analyze, you know, what is going on among ourselves. So never did the priest participate in any of the, and that means since 1965 I did it every semester, so that's, what did we, 87 times or whatever? Never was there a priest or nun in there.
They can't possibly be threatened.
Well, the reason, you know, you have to compare with other things. For instance, I was McGovern's campaign manager, and at that time I tried to, you know, to get a room here so that we could meet, and they would not do it because McGovern was too far on the left. So another thing, I brought Hans Küng here, and the bishop wrote a wonderful calligraphic letter to all the members of the diocese that they should not go to Hans Küng's speeches. So Hans Küng, his permission to teach as a Catholic theologian was withdrawn in December 1978, and so I brought him here in the 80s or whatever. And so I did not lose the friendship of the bishop. I mean, we were still good friends. But he wrote that letter that nobody should, and people didn't obey. They went anyway. So we had the whole Miller Auditorium full, and the university invited him to the Black Swan, and it was very nice. And he got a doctorate from Ann Arbor, the university. But this diocese was very much, you know, against this. Now, I brought Metz, who is the father of the liberation theology, but I brought him through K College, you know, and there was nobody there neither. And he talked then with the Baptist ministers in the morning, and he was so horrified. You know, they asked questions, why are we on earth, or something like that, without the slightest clue where anything is, you know. And Metz didn't think that this was possible, and he had a nervous breakdown. I had to take him to the hotel down there, and he wanted to celebrate the Mass here for my wife, and he couldn't do it. He could just sit there and like a dead man, you know. It was just horrifying. I said, look, I'm living here for 30 years, you know, you're here for 3 days and become nuts, you know. I'm still halfway normal, you know. So this, that all hangs together, you know. It is Father John, for instance. His father told him all the time, you have to listen to this Father Coughlin. He is a great man, and so on. So there's a whole generation of people who are, you know, who listen to Coughlin, who was a friend of Dr. Goebbels, you know. He was a super Nazi. Right. And a friend of Henry Ford, who was a Nazi as well. I mean, so this whole atmosphere is a very, very difficult atmosphere. I mean, the bishops, you know, have no difficulty with scholarly things or whatever. They think I'm a Superman or whatever, which is not true at all. But what they are not used to is that lay people are theologians, for instance. Europe is full of them, you know, in all the universities and so on. But here it hasn't dawned to them yet. Somehow you have to be ordained. They mix that up, you know. The Eastern Church has priests, but the priests are not theologians. The lay people are theologians. So I visited them several times. There is a seminary in Athens, and it is full of lay professors. And the priests are just singing and clapping hands and singing hallelujah and pray the Mass, you know, and so on, which is fine. It's a wonderful thing to do. But, you know, that you can sing nicely and celebrate the Mass doesn't mean that you can think or that you can be a theologian or whatever. So I think that all these things play together, you know, and these things last forever, you know. It's I went sometimes to the pastors' conference and downtown, and so I was sitting there, and they were discussing what would happen to them if they would be buried in a Protestant cemetery. And I think, do you think you would notice it? It was just, I thought I was in an insane asylum, you know, and I never went again, you know. Then they had some kind of a meeting, you know, Protestant Catholics together, a little luncheon or whatever, and it was the same thing, you know. What would happen if they would be buried in a Protestant cemetery? I mean, that would be the least I would be worried about, you know, particularly with their record here. Judgment Day would be much more frightful than to wake up in a Protestant cemetery. So it is just, you know, the same thing what made Metz sick in 3 days, you know, that is going on all the time. You know, so it's not very different from the political thing, you know. And so therefore it's not bad will, you know, it has nothing to do with bad intentions. It is a certain way how one is conditioned. There was in the 60s a certain opening where, you know, there were 30 nuns would sit in this room, you know. The nuns were much more ahead of the priests, you know. But then, you know, as outside the right wing took over, you know, in the church the right wing took over. I mean, I brought the chaplains, you know, from different universities together, and I gave them talks in Detroit. And there was poor Father Solomon who drank himself to death, and he never knew where he was. And I talked, you know, for a whole morning, and when I was almost finished, he came in, and the nuns came and said, "My God, all the alcohol is gone." They had, you know, maybe 100 bottles or whatever, and during the night, all these priests drank all these bottles of vodka or whatever it was, and Father Solomon was the, you know, drank most of it, and never woke up really, and then he came and could never remember later on that he had been there, and he was a very good man. He was, my wife played the organ here for 12 years, and once he gave her a chicken or whatever. That's all she ever got as far as payment is concerned for playing the organ every Sunday. So, but he at least did it, so that was, you know, was a good thing. I liked the chicken. I think it was a chicken, maybe it was something else. But nevertheless, the you know, that is, and the education of the priests is not on a good level. So the seminaries, you know, they produce. There's an old priest coming in. He talks about with God all the time. I wonder how he's doing this, but God is talking with him all the time, and then he tells the people what God just told him. And so he has his private revelations of all kinds. So. So there is, you know, it has something to do with certain forms of Catholicism, Polish Catholicism or German Catholicism, and people, you know, bring their own priests along sometimes of their own ethnic group, and you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, differentiation, but cognitively they are not on the ball really. I even wrote that in a, you know, there's a book out here where I took this example. For instance, sometimes on Good Friday, it cannot happen anymore now, but on Good Friday there was no water, no holy water, and people came in and put their hand in it and went on, in spite of the fact that there was no water in it. That means they do things they don't know why the hell they're doing it. So the cognitive side, the best side is the expressive side, you know, hallelujah and clapping hands. Ethics is a little bit better, a little bit less than the expressive thing. The cognitive factor is almost not present. So that all explains this, why we are where we are.
An excellent example would be Salvador.
Yeah.
What the church did, what the Vatican, who the Vatican sent to Salvador.
Right. Well, I mean, I taught the man on nuns, you know, every summer, and the same thing happened. Sometimes they denied it, that it had really happened, but there was a where the church became a critical church, that's it, you know, where they became, is there somebody there?
Just continue.
Oh, okay. So, you know, so every summer I went there, and some of these people in El Salvador were killed, two Sisters of Marinol were killed, and two Benedictines and a laywoman, and the two of them were my students. And so my task was to do two things: to prepare people to go there to El Salvador, so that they would be prepared to know what socialists are. They had no idea what a socialist is. And there they would meet people who were socialistic most of the time. And then when they came back again, they were supposed to go home to their parents. Well, what's happening?
Well, we're trying not to interrupt the taping, but we're doing a good job at it because all the doors are locked.
Well, come in this way.
So, how'd that happen?
So, you're there. Oh, you appeared. Oh my God. Okay, so I mean, the question was, you know, why they do not appear. So, but this was just, you know, a few explanations. So, it's when people are trained in a certain way with a certain mindset, you know, they will act according to it, and they cannot break through the conditioning.
Do you think perhaps since Vatican II, that was some,
Well, I mean, if
time
Vatican
for the-
II would have not been betrayed, then that would mean the Erasmians would have come through, the humanists and the church would have come through, but they didn't come through, they repressed it again.
I think since
Now,
Vatican II,
not
it's-
all over the place, because you see what you have there in the church there. First of all, there is no thing anymore where you put your hand in. Now there is this big baptismal, so the Protestants had said, the Last Supper and the baptism are the main sacraments. Now they learned from Luther, so you have to really appreciate after 400 years they learned something. So in terms of architecture, they put the altar and then this huge baptismal thing, And the other sacraments have somehow disappeared into the niches. So there is still a little room for the sacrament of reconciliation, where they will put my wife's picture in, by the way. She will be very happy to hang there. So, but the other sacraments are not very visible. And so, but they learned in the meantime from the Protestants, where Luther was right after all, And the Anglican Church made the wisest decision, to say these two sacraments are the main ones. They are really well substantiated in the New Testament. And the other five, we are not so sure about it. They may have come later on as a matter of tradition. And so therefore we put them a little bit in the background. Now Catholics have, in this architecture there, the liturgical reform of the Second Vatican Council has come through. So you cannot say that it is totally rejected or betrayed. The leadership in the Vatican has betrayed it, but not all bishops have done so, not all priests, not all nuns, So it is it's not a white or black type of a thing. But the overall impact is that the Erasmian influence on the council and the council has been repressed to a large extent, And the reason is the Erasmians wanted to have an open church in discourse, and that's what we see, because this whole Utopia is a discourse, really. A discourse with More himself, who discusses with a man who went below the equator, and there was a huge, horrible territory, but then below it there was an island, and that is the island Utopia. And this man now reports about their customs and their constitution and how rational they are, and so on. So that means these Erasmians were very open people. So the program, to talk with the world, to have discourse with the world, that is an Erasmian humanistic type of an idea. So it would have been very nice, if that would have come through. But what you see, the Christian-Jewish dialogue, we had that, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it all stopped. Or the Protestant-Catholic dialogue, and it all stopped. So as the Erasmian element, the Thomas More element was pushed back. That somebody gave the name to this thing here. I don't know who did it. Father Taylor, may have done it. He did a good thing. That was, as going toward the council, where these Erasmian forces came through. But in the meantime, they have not done anything about Thomas More. I think I did something before already, but otherwise they're completely silent about, now they mentioned that in the little letter there, it's our saint, it's our patron saint. Yes, so he is. So therefore, he should be programmatic, that should be our, that's how we should act like he acted, but then you have to know what he was all about. So this, the talk with other world religions, with the Islamic people, and we did that too. We had a discourse with the rabbis and the Muslims and Christians and so on in another church, there. So that was done, but it does not flow, It's not a real movement. It is done okay. The council said something, so let's do it, but the heart is not in it, So maybe people, the Erasmians did not prepare the masses of the people for this new critical church. They just didn't come through. So all that explains why, but so the 60s, the nuns of St. Joseph were very active, and would come and would discuss. It was the Vietnam War, and they took a very critical thing. So it is the conformist type of a church and a critical type of a church, or a post-bourgeois type of a church. You see, we are in a transition period. Also, the church is in a transition period. So if you have, this in modern time, that was to some extent still feudal type of a church, but to some extent it became bourgeois. And now the question is, to go into a post-bourgeois type of a church, and the question is, can this Thomas More and what he said there, what he did, could that be a guidance, in that transition period for the church now specifically? That means, can this Erasmian thing, which led to the Vatican Council, can that go beyond the Second Vatican Council? Can it be rescued, or does it fall to this betrayal? And Ratzinger is the traitor in this whole thing. Think also that tradition, the Latin word tradition, means two things. It means to carry over, and it means to betray. Because, in every tradition there is an element of transfer of knowledge and so on, but there is also a betrayal toward the one who initiated the whole thing. And so I discussed that with an Orthodox bishop, in the Ukraine there last year, when I mentioned that, and he admitted it. Yeah. And so, but then we are the alternative. Either, if that church had not remembered Jesus, we wouldn't know anything about him. We would know as much about him as about Socrates, which is about nothing, as far as common people are concerned. So, so this is the problem. If you have the church tells you about Jesus, but in a totally distorted type of a way. But what is better now? To have no Jesus because he's forgotten, or to have a Jesus who is distorted? And people make both decisions. But the majority of people would say it is better to have him in a totally distorted way than not to have him at all. Because if you have him in a distorted way, maybe some Sunday, somebody may say the right thing. And accidentally that happens, So Father Ken suddenly interprets a little piece from the gospel, in an astonishing Erasmian way, particularly with this ownership of the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
There was a gospel recently, the landlord who did certain things and so on, where suddenly Father Ken came up, with a very critical type of an interpretation. But it goes under, And another question is, the priests do not want their community to be split. They know that millions of Catholics and evangelicals voted for this mass murderer twice. And they know that others were opposed to it. And usually they even know who is who. And they don't want to make that thematic. That means they don't want to articulate it. As long as they don't articulate it, they all stay together and sing and clap their hands. But if it is made articulate, and if you, as I recommended and said horrible crimes have happened, we have become guilty, we therefore should repent, and in order to get atonement. They rejected this, and they took Thomas More, but they didn't know what they were choosing, because that is the whole Erasmian tradition which finally broke through in the Council, the Second Vatican Council, and which has been repressed and betrayed. So, and this has nothing to do, when the bishop wrote that letter, he just followed the order from the Vatican, that the king had no right to teach, and so on. So it's not that I wrote to him, I said, look, if you have something against Hans Küng, let's go together, the Black Swan, and we will talk with him, he's for this Erasmian thing, he likes to talk and so on. No, he didn't want to talk, so he didn't come. The whole university came, the whole faculty came. They all celebrated Hans Küng, and the bishop was missing. But, it's not bad will or what. And then when this is applied, this Erasmian thing, then it looks the following way, For instance, Rome asked the bishop here what I was teaching about abortion. Since I'm a Catholic theologian, and have the permission to teach in the name of the Catholic Church. So what does he teach about abortion? The bishop went to Father John here, who is my priest, their pastor, and Father John refused to go to me. He said to the bishop, if you have something against Professor Siebert, go to him yourself. And that lasted the whole summer. And so then at the end, the bishop said, if you don't go to Professor Siebert and ask him that question, you'll be fired. So then Father John called, and he was very angry. He had all this trouble with authority, Father John. And so he said, you know, I'm so sorry, but I have to ask you what you think. And I said, it's very, very simple, John, it's no problem. And I said, first of all, the Vatican Council said we should open up the windows and talk with the Word, And no, the first thing was, that I had 8 children. And I said, there was no abortion, so obviously there was not abortion. So I'm not personally for abortion or whatever. So, but number 2, the Erasmian line is we want to talk with the Word. So let's talk with the Word about it. And let's see a discourse where the better argument is. That's Erasmian, That's also, Habermas and so on. And so then the better argument should prevail. If the better argument should be that there should be no abortion, and that abortion is something bad by the golden rule, or by the categorical imperative, or by the a priori, communication community, or whatever the modern ethics may be. And we come to that conclusion, because the modern secular atheistic way to be ethical is, what will we get the consensus of the possible victim? The possible victim, is the embryo. The embryo cannot talk, so therefore you have to have advocates. So, but the advocate may say, you put me into existence, and then you wipe me out again. That is not a very, very rational behavior, Now, maybe the advocate could also say, I'm very happy to be aborted, because I would have to go up on the north side, and it's better to be annihilated than to go up in an American slum, where you cannot realize your humanity, So in that case, we would have the consensus. So this is how a modern person who has no theological basis, how he would argue, So if we have, whatever, intervention into the genome, in order to prevent certain sicknesses to go from one generation to the other. We would probably get someday the consensus of that person. So if we say, we intervened in your genome, is that all right with you now, when you're 20 years old or so? He would probably say, I'm glad you freed me, from this. I don't think that cancer is as such inherited, but the predisposition may very well be, So we took that away from you, and therefore you may not get this disease which your grandfather had and your father and so on. So we would get the consensus. But what if we have eugenics, liberal eugenics, and somebody would say, I want to have a daughter who is a beauty queen, What if someday we would ask her, are you happy that we make you a beauty queen? And she would say, yes, but I would like to have had some twain too, That would have been nice, And then she may not be happy. We may not get the consensus, and that makes it unethical then, according to modern, standards. Or a big sports guy with big muscles, Are you happy that you're a big football player? Well, he also would like to have a little bit ability to think, would be nice. And so he may not be happy for the intervention. So therefore, so I said, but if we would find out, that by Christian standards, God speaks, Adonai, Amar, and so on, again and again and again. God spoke to Moses, and so on and so on. Did he speak or did he not speak? And if he has spoken, or if we come by humanistic ethics to the same conclusion and so on, then we cannot push that norm now into the throat of these people, but we have to, make it possible for them. See, this is what Erasmus says, you hang 20 people on one gallows, for stealing a bottle of milk or whatever, But you have to ask, if it is really possible for these people not to steal when they are unemployed and so on. So therefore I said to the bishop, I said, look, we have to see that they really can follow up whatever they do. So about $5,000 birth costs here in Kalamazoo, and abortion about $250. So they don't even have the $250 for an abortion, not to speak of the 5,000, So that means, and today that has become, a public knowledge in a certain sense, because those people who are for pro-life or whatever, which is a wholly distorted type of statements, because the others are pro-choice, they are not for pro-abortion. this in itself, you know, when they said these are the pro-abortion people, they are not for pro-abortion, they are pro-choice, with the hope that people will make the choice maybe not to have an abortion. And if they must make the choice to have an abortion, that this will not be criminalized. That is the whole thing, you know. But to put this whole thing straight is also a humanistic thing, to understand speech acts adequately, so that if you repeat them, is that what you really meant? Okay, these three things went to the bishop, you know. And so he reported it to Rome, and I have never heard anything about it. So obviously, they were satisfied with the argument. So, and the bishop did something. See, they are not evil people. He set up a fund, you know, in this rather big diocese here, in order to help women, if they wanted to, not to have an abortion, and they want to have the baby, then the church would then pay for the birth, which is of course only a very small part of the whole thing, you know. The big payments start afterwards, you know, more and more. And so, but that was at least an attempt, you know, to say, if we demand this, if we must demand it, no abortion, child is to be born, how can she do that? She cannot even pay for an abortion. And so he set that up, that fund, and it still exists. I just asked Father Ken, it exists. But what the bishop found out was that whatever the money they got was not enough to take care of the illegitimate birth in Hackett High School alone. And the bishop had a nervous breakdown. He had to resign. He resigned his office over this thing, you know. He told Rome he could not go on any longer. Because on one side, you know, you have these norms there in Rome and so on. On the other side, he lives right beside the slums there. He lives close to the railroad station, you know. That he doesn't live there, but he has his office there. And so this tension, you know, with that what ought to be, what Thomas More has in his Utopia now, and the other side, what is really happening. So, you know, but I mean, this is very costly in human terms, you know. Okay, so maybe that answers a little bit the difficult things in which we find ourselves, right? I mean, if people behave in a certain way and they are, you know, don't come or whatever, there is a reason for that, you know. They may simply be lazy, or they may simply look television or whatever, but, you know, there are sometimes more serious things there as well. So therefore we have to suspend judgment, really. But it has to be done, no matter if people come or not, you know. Otherwise they should cancel that name and should call it something else, you know. But, you know, many of these saints, you know, if you think of Benedict or St. Francis or whatever, you know, we discussed recently there with Fromm about being and having, you know. Where did Fromm get that from? He got it from Master Eckhart, you know. Master Eckhart was a contemporary of Assisi, you know, Francis of Assisi. Francis of Assisi was a man to the extreme of being. So on one side you have being, on the other side you have having. And you have that through the whole Utopia there, you know. What counts is not this having now. Not only the having of the feudal lords, but now the new bourgeoisie coming, you know. They want to have, and so on. According to Fromm, psychoanalyst, you know, this having thing leads to insanity. And the being thing leads to sainthood. And maybe people have to have a little bit in order to be, really, you know. And being means the same thing what Karl Marx, of course, means with the realm of freedom. The realm of freedom and the realm of necessity means freedom means that I can unfold my touch, my hearing, my seeing, but for this I need music, I need real paintings. How can you unfold anything on the other side of the railroad station? You cannot even unfold it on this side of the railroad station. You know? So therefore, so therefore, it is possible for Fromm to bring Eckhart or to bring St. Francis or to bring Marx, and so they are in the same camp, you know. So what does St. Francis do? He takes all his clothes off nakedly and throws all the clothes to his father's, toward his father, and the father was a businessman. Early capitalism, that's where it started, in the cities, you know, with the burghers, the bourgeois, and so on. And the bishop had to come and put a pluvial around him, this raincoat, so that he wouldn't be totally naked. And later on, he didn't even want not only no property for the individuals, but no property for the order, neither. So, and Innocent III, the most powerful Pope, you know, who claimed both Americas here and so on under his power and possession, power position, he forbid it and ordered St. Francis that the order had to have property, the individuals not. But he wanted to go so far that every monk would go there from house to house, you know, from day to day, wouldn't know at night where he would sleep or whatever, because the complete freedom from all having, so that you could be. So my doctor father, the fascist lords, you know, had a little book about St. Francis, in which he put this being character out very, very beautifully. So, so that would, you know, these are all just a few comments. But do we have anything else about what we, you know, our time diagnosis and what is happening in the church now? And with this diagnosis, there is also a prognosis, you know. And so, will the Pope act in terms of what the Vatican Council and the Erastian bishops and so on, if we want to call them that way, what they have determined? For instance, very specifically, the Jews should not be charged with the killing of Christ. And will he hold on to this now? And will he say to the three bishops, you know, if you don't accept this from the Vatican Council, the cancellation of this anti-Semitism, then you have to be excommunicated. You cannot belong to this church community anymore. After he just lifted it, can he really put him again under the ban, you know, afterwards? I mean, Meister Eckhart is still under the ban. You know, it's 700 years now, and he has not been brought back into the church. And he brings those three fascists back there and so on. See how unbalanced all this is? And the masses of the believers are not in touch with it, or what, except, you know, there are obviously a few thousand in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria who have protested and left the church for it. But otherwise, you know, there is some kind of a deadness there, you know. Okay, so what? So what, you know? Killed 1 million people, so what? Bush in the last weeks, you know, had that so what. He put so what behind whatever he said. But this is, you know, an inhuman type of an indifference. Okay, so so when we see Thomas More, you know, in the context of this movement, humanism in Catholicism, humanism in Protestantism, a Christian humanism, you know, that means to be a human being. To be a Christian means to be a true human being. You know, if you say you are a Christian and you kill 1 million people, you are not a Christian. It's phony. It's a lie. Okay. Now. Anything about this, then I want to make, we want to look at the movie too, so I will not make it a point. We will just look at this, okay?
9 o'clock.
How far, well, can we have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so?
Keep this running, or? Go ahead. All right.
Okay, you can carry it home with your little paper there. By the way, here I want to mention that, you know, where Thomas More broke through. That is John the 23rd, you know, who wrote these two, is Encyclica Pacementaris, Peace on Earth. That is based on Thomas More.
Where can I get those?
Well, they probably have them everywhere. Nobody reads them, but, you know.
Why do you think would be everywhere?
Okay, just write down the title.
I think suspicious.
Find them on there.
We wouldn't have two wars at the same time if we had read it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but nobody reads nowadays. Average American reads 1 book a year.
Who is the author?
John the 23rd.
John the 23rd.
Yeah. Yeah, they are beautiful.
God.
The great pride of my life is that I was once John the 23rd theology chair in Fredericton. That was the peak of my career. It was a good name to follow up with. Where were we? I think he had trouble already with the king. The king wanted him to sign on. He said, I will leave you out. Remember this? I leave you out.
So he's already the chancellor, correct?
Yeah, he is the chancellor. He has not yet resigned.
We've had the surprise
And
visit.
he will be the successor of this fellow there, Wolsey, Butcher's son.
Yes.